Hi everyone, I'm Erin, and I'd like to just address a topic that came up in one of the conversations and comments on a previous video. And the question was basically asking, how do you deal with accents? And that's a wonderful question. First off, let me just acknowledge that I don't have an accent. Everybody else does, right? That's of course a joke. Everybody has an accent. It's a matter of what you're familiar with and what you're not familiar with. So first thing to think about with accents is knowing yourself. What are the accents that you are familiar with? What are the accents that you use, and understanding how your accent is impacting other people and their ability to understand and comprehend what you're saying. And then of course the question of the commenter was really directed at how do I get better at understanding and comprehending different accents. So a couple of maybe obvious suggestions would be to listen to as much audio content as you can from other areas, other regions where that particular language is spoken, whether it's English, whether it's Spanish, whatever the language might happen to be. Of course, language fluctuates and is dynamic and has different varieties and flavors. In fact, I shared in a previous video when I started interpreting, one of my primary concerns was I going to be able to understand the Spanish speakers? My Spanish speaking life and world began in high school, so I started learning my second language later in life and then continued studying through college, and my first abroad experience was living in Santa Cruz, Bolivia, where I went from the classroom experience of speaking conversational Spanish and watching movies and doing all that lovely stuff within the context of the safety net of a classroom to living in a real world environment where I needed to use Spanish to be able to survive. After about a 3-month period of time, I was dreaming in Spanish. I was able to get into arguments with people in Spanish, and so I was feeling pretty good about my Spanish skills, pat myself on the back. Fast forward about a year and a half later, and now I'm living abroad in Central America, in Honduras, and I felt like I was starting from scratch, square one, in trying to understand the accent and the different terminology that people were using. So my confidence level went from really high to really low. Fast forward a few years down the line, and now I'm back in the United States interpreting for the first time and acknowledging that the majority of the Spanish speakers for whom I would be interpreting would be from Mexico. I'd never been to Mexico and hadn't really had much opportunity to interact in real world scenarios with people from Mexico. I remembered what my previous experience was with having to adjust my way of listening to the Spanish language. And so it was challenging at some times to understand some speakers, but even acknowledging and knowing that there's going to be somebody who has a different style of Spanish or English or whatever the language might be than what yours is a starting point to be able to adjust your comprehension to their way of speaking and their speech. So a couple of practical things. Do listen to music, listen to YouTube videos, watch news programs, watch movies, sitcoms, whatever it is from the different regions of the world, whatever you have available to you, so that you can immerse yourself in different styles of speech. Another reality of interpreting in the healthcare world is that we're interpreting for people who maybe have learned English as their second language as well, whether it's providers or nurses, etc. And so you're, as interpreter, constantly dealing with different accents. If you add the variable of the mask, if you're interpreting on site or if you're interpreting by video and everybody in the room is wearing masks, that can add another layer of challenge to listening through the accent to get to the content and the meaning. So what do we do as interpreters? Anytime we're not sure or can't quite understand what somebody is saying, we clarify. So think about how could you ask for clarification in a way that isn't just about saying, excuse me, what was that? Excuse me, what did you say? Excuse me, I can't hear what you're saying, or your accent is too strong. We want to avoid those types of accusatory phrases and just kind of pull it back to us and acknowledging what our limitation is. So perhaps saying something along the lines of, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite understand what you said. Could you repeat that again? And taking a pause and really listening actively, and also thinking about for yourself, when you're trying to deliver your message to somebody who's maybe not familiar with your accent, maybe slowing it down half a beat. True story, I was interpreting for a doctor, and he was going through the end of the appointment summary of what the plan was for the treatment, etc. And so he reminded the patient that the patient needed to go to the pharmacy and pick up the empty box. And I thought to myself, why on earth would the patient need to go to the pharmacy and pick up the empty box? I knew that something didn't quite click in what I had understood from what the doctor had said. And so I took a moment, and even though I thought I understood those words, I knew something wasn't quite right. So I went back to the doctor and I asked the doctor if he could repeat what he said again. And this doctor, not a native English speaker, had a stronger accent. And so when my brain registered that he had said, pick up the empty box, when he repeated himself, he again had awareness that he had an accent, so he slowed down his speech a half a beat. He repeated what he said, enunciating a little bit more, and then he said, go to the pharmacy and pick up your antibiotics. Now that makes sense, right? So as we're dealing with these different messages and accents and the beautiful variety and flavor of how people express themselves as interpreters, embrace that beautiful variety of language and communication, understand where the limitations are, and never ever be afraid to ask for clarification, or never be afraid if somebody is asking you to clarify your speech for them, because guess what? Everybody has an accent. Well, except for me, because I'm from Wisconsin and we don't have accents in Wisconsin. That's a joke. If you like this video, have comments that you'd like to share about it, maybe an experience of when you had difficulty understanding an accent, or what is your favorite accent to interpret for? Whatever you'd like to do to continue the conversation, we'd love to hear from you. Like, subscribe, share. Talk with you soon.